Good afternoon, Tony Datino here doing my Live with Tony. As you can tell, I am still in my New York residence and hoping to return and expecting to return to Orlando, Windermere, Florida in the middle of next week. Put on a little bit of my Hawaiian shirt today to give me a little bit of that flavor of being in the warm weather, and of course the warm weather came. We're hitting our 90s here in the New York area. I think the weather in Florida is a little bit less. Struggling with a little bit of a rotator cuff tear. I fell off a couple of steps, trying to repair something and fix something, and slipped. Went off a couple of steps, had a little bit of a rotator, and recovering from what I did to my thumb and finger as I go, which then brought me a couple of articles I've been reading and waiting in doctor's offices. And I just wish, first of all, I had to go to see one doctor for the wrist, another doctor for the shoulder, another doctor for hip. I mean, it's like people are broken into buckets in silos as opposed to looking at the whole human body. So finding the right doctors that can try to help you with this is one to the next point. I've done some reading, so I've been reading. I do reading all the time, but sitting in doctor offices, boy, as you're waiting, it's amazing what you can read and learn. And today I read this article in the May issue of Scientific American, May 2021, Holes in the Shield. This was amazing listening to this, because what they're talking about is the blood-brain barrier. And what we thought is that the blood-brain barrier was designed to keep certain things out of the brain, meaning it was a barrier, it was a block. The change that they're now looking at and suggesting is the blood-brain barrier is a blood-brain filter. Now, stop and think about the difference. One's a barrier designed to keep things out. The other is a filter that's designed to filter in good and keep out bad. It's no different than the filter in your car filtering the oil through, or the air filters in the cabin of your car with the air conditioning running. The filters in your residence, in your AC units, and protecting mold from coming through. So think of that filter as our brain that is discovering, which I think is just amazing what they're discovering, and it's linked to Alzheimer's and dementia and cognitive impairment. But just think of the fact that we have a filter, not a barrier. And what significance does that then promote and have? And what causes some breakdowns in the filtering system that then promotes more bad particles and bad chemicals getting into the brain, that maybe if we could only know a little bit more about it and we could figure out how to repair and maintain the filter. I don't know that we could put new filters in, but what difference could that make to the diseases that we have that impact our brain? So the second thing they've learned is as we get older, our filters do not work as well as any filter in a house, car, any location, right? Airplanes, we talk about air filters now with COVID on planes, and what kind of filtering systems do people have? It's like any filter we have, well, we have one in our brain. So what is it that science is learning about the filters in our brain? And this filtering system, as we get older, as in any filtering system, then begins to allow bad particles, chemicals, items through the filtering system. And it shows in the tests that they've been doing that these lead to a degradation of brain function. Now, what was most interesting to me as I was reading it, and they were saying, okay, so what are some of our life experiences? Are there things in our lives that can have an more and more is confirming, is learning, more and more is confirming impact on this filtering system. Are there things that we do in our life that can help it? Have more damage to this filtering system. Love dearly, the loss of a job, the worry about financial impacts, where am I going to live, the number of homeless people, that becomes very personable or very personal to each individual and how we handle stress and our responses to it. So to the point that they find in their research that people that are in this stress, it increases an inflammation in the body, right? We've talked about stress. It impacts the adrenaline. It impacts the, God, I'm going to lose it. My goodness. It's a C word. It impacts the flow of a chemical in our body, the fight or flight chemical. And I can't believe I'm having a brain blank on this right now. Cortisol. It floods it, and so a level of cortisol in the body is a good thing. A level too much is a bad thing. So up we go. We get a push. We get a rush, and now we're superhuman. But too much of it becomes a detriment to us. And so to that degree, this inflammation that comes from these, how we process stress, then generates interactions with this filtering system that then get into our brain. That's not a barrier, but is a filtering system that has to cause us to reflect on, so what else can we do? Well, what do we do about all of this? Well, the first thing that they're suggesting is maybe there's something we can have. There's, again, we're back to drugs, and I'm saying maybe there's a nutrient that they can find, and they're discovering this thing called albumin, albumin, and that maybe this albumin might make a difference. We learned that when albumin gets into the brain, it appears to stimulate key brain cells that provide structural and chemical support for the neurons and their connections. So now this is interesting. When albumin contacts a cell in there, it binds to receptors that usually serve as a docking station for a TGF-B factor. All you need to know is that it localizes the inflammation and limits the damage. That's all you need to know. Albumin. Now, is that the right chemical? No, nobody's making any bets on this yet. But what it's doing is it's going through the filtering system, and it is minimizing the damage to our brain cells. Boy, this is like going to be exciting to see where this goes. They're not ready to come out through anything yet. They're in early testing mode here. I think we got some major people that are looking at this, and it has huge potential for people that worry about Alzheimer's and dementia. But the key point they're finding is that this leakage has changed the way they look at the blood-brain barrier into it's a blood-brain filtering system. And how do we rejuvenate? How do we maintain a stronger filtering system regardless of our age. So it goes on to talk about how do we fix the damage. The problem we have is there are 50 million people they're talking about as Alzheimer's, and they're saying we're at a stage now, and this is mind-boggling, this data. We got 10 million new people that get Alzheimer's every year. 10 million. I'm reading these numbers and I'm saying, across the globe now. We're talking about across the globe. But so we have to relook at how we look. Too many people. Look at just what's happened with COVID and the national world response to it. But the next step for the scientists is to look for strategies and therapies to reduce the leakage. In the past, pharmaceutical research into the barrier focused on ways to increase permeability, not to limit it. So to get more drugs to treat the tumors and infections. Our results now show that it's time to flip the question. Can we come up with ways to stop the shield from degrading and stop harmful substances getting across and through the filtering system, or at least interrupt the fall of molecular dominoes? There is a chance to do a lot of good for a lot of people if we can figure out how to reinforce the filtering system. This is like 180 on the they're flipping this research and looking at this totally 180 degrees from all the work and effort they've done. And that changing the drugs, because what they've discovered is the drugs that they thought were Alzheimer's have done nothing. They've spent billions and billions of dollars on Alzheimer's research, coming up with how do we wipe out the amyloids? How do we kill and get rid of all those? And they basically come back and said, you know what, it hasn't mattered. So now they've got a flipping of how do we get the filtering system to work better? How do we prevent some of these leaks that allow the wrong things to get in? And maybe we have found a eureka. Exciting, and as I say to people, what we are learning about our brain over and over again is just huge.